Welcome to part 13 of this series, trying to locate the sons of Noah and where they really went to. Now, in this video we're going to be looking at Cush and Mizraim, and the previous video we were looking at the Hittites, who are a descendant of Canaan. And we mentioned these Kassites, that there was this Kassite dynasty of Babylon, and they ruled this dynasty for about, they ruled this area for about 400 years. And we're also told that the Kassites conquered Elam, but then maybe the Elamites were actually going to take revenge, because we learned that the Elamites conquered Babylon and actually ended this Kassite dynasty. But we don't know what the origin of these Kassites may have been, and they're quite mysterious. And remember, it said at the top of the article, don't confuse them with the Cushites. But I'm wondering whether they are somehow connected to the Cushites. So maybe in the ancient world with different cultures, there may have been different ways to spell Cush or pronounce Cush, depending on the region or the language. So maybe Cassi could be connected to Cush. But the reason why I bring this up is because we're going to look at this kingdom, or the Sumerian city known as Kish. And we can see it here, look, there's Kish next to Babylon. Now the Sumerians are quite a fascinating civilization, because they have lots of records on their clay tablets, and some of the stories in their clay tablets actually sound like biblical stories from the Bible. So let's look at what they say about Kish, and just remember that this land of Sumeria, or Sumer, in the Bible is known as the land of Shinar. I just want to show you something about the city they call Kish. It says here, the Sumerian king list states that Kish was the first city to have kings following the deluge, beginning with Geshur. And this gets interesting, because if we think about this deluge being connected to possibly Noah's great flood, the great flood of Noah, and that the first city to have kings was Kish, I found this other legend from James Bruce, who was an explorer who visited the Ethiopian highlands. And the Abyssinians have a tradition that after the deluge, Cush and his family traveled with his family up the Nile until they reached the Atbara plain. And it says here that they built this kingdom known as Aksum, and then later Meroe. But can you see how potentially important this is? Because according to this tradition, the first place that Cush and his family went to was Abyssinia, okay, or near the region of Ethiopia. So Aksum, let's just see if I can show you a map. Okay, so Aksum is in this region of Abyssinia, and what this legend is saying, that the first place that Cush and his family went to after the flood was Aksum. Okay, so then this would be the first city of Cush, and Nimrod is the son of Cush. So this could be the first place that Nimrod went out to build his cities, because he was a famous city builder. So can you see that if we link this Kish to Cush, now the Sumerians are saying that the first place to have kings was Kish after the deluge, and if we can say that Kish is connected to Cush, then what you could be saying is that the first place to have kings after the deluge was the city of Cush. And if we connect that to this legend of the Abyssinians, the first place to have kingship after the flood would be Cush, but it would be here in Abyssinia. You see how important that would be, because we've been told that this region of Iraq is like a cradle of civilization, because if you say Babylon is here, then you've got the Sumerian civilization, and you've got the stories of the Bible, like the land of Shinar and Nimrod, and there's other kingdoms around it, like Assyria and Elam. And they say that this is like possibly one of the earliest civilizations, or the cradle of mankind, or the cradle of civilization. But now, I'm not saying that there weren't people living here in ancient times, and there weren't cities, and there wasn't an ancient civilization here. But what we want to know is the truth. What was actually the real cradle of mankind? Because if we think about that legend of the Abyssinians, that Cush and his family they sailed up the Nile and created this kingdom here, then potentially this would be the area for the cradle of mankind, that this would be the starting point for the kingdom of Cush and Nimrod, the great city builder. And we spoke about this, that we've got this connection here with this Sennaar. Could that be connected to the biblical land of Shinar? And that this region could be where the Tower of Babel was. And you can see how the picture starts to make sense, because if Cush and his family were first in this area and built a city in this area of Abyssinia, Nimrod is obviously in that family. He would also be in this region and starting his kingdoms. You see how that kind of works together. And I was looking at the Atbara River Nile, and I saw here that you still have this region known as Sennaar, but the spelling is even closer when you think about the land of Shinar in the Bible. So this is very fascinating, because it will totally change how we look at the ancient world and our history, because it's quite a big difference when you think about it with the claims that this is the cradle of civilization. But maybe actually we should be looking in this region here of Ethiopia, Abyssinia, as the true cradle of civilization. And now we also have to think about, what makes sense and what rings true, and each person has to decide for themselves. But from my view and my thoughts, we see this long Nile River, and it actually makes sense that this Nile River would be where the cradle of civilization would have started, because we know that the Egyptian empire was a hub in the ancient world, especially when you think about the Bible. When there was a great famine, other nations came to Egypt for grain. This is a Mecca area for the ancient world. So it would not make sense that the cradle of civilization would actually be in this region along the Nile, and that the ancient civilizations would be, the big civilizations in the ancient world would be on the Nile River. So it's very interesting, and let me know what you think about that. I'm sure I'm not the only scholar. I'm not the first person to try to think about this connection with Kish to Cush. I've read other people that have also wondered whether this could be connected to Cush. But let's look at just a few of the other sons of Cush, but not all of them. We're going to look at Seba, because Seba is very famous because he's connected to the Sabians, and Ram is also potentially a famous son because of Sheba and Dedan. And we spoke about the waters of Dedan, and Sheba in the Bible with the story of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, coming from the land of Sheba. So connected to Sheba and the Sabians. So let's look at the Sabians and their kingdom. So this is a map. I know it's quite small, but it's actually can show that the Sabians, the kingdom, was actually both sides of the Red Sea. And that's quite important when we think about Jubilees. Remember how the book of Jubilees said that Cush would be dwelling towards the east of his brother Mizraim. So Mizraim is the ancient name for Egypt. So I think Egypt is a Greek word, and I think it derives from one of the characters in the Greek mythology known as Aegyptos, but it was actually known as Mizraim. So the book of Jubilees is saying that Cush would dwell to the east of his brother Mizraim. And now you can see that Cushites are in the east, even down to Saudi Arabia. But we also spoke of them going further east, maybe to the, like forming the Hindu Kush mountain range, or the name of the Hindu Kush mountain range being named after Cush. And we spoke about the influence in India. But let's look at an article here about the Sabians, because there's some interesting things in this article. That this is a very important area for ancient trade routes, and the incense road. And the spices was a very valuable commodity in the ancient world. And the one that they speak about here is frankincense. And I'll just tell you that the general idea of this article is saying that these spices like frankincense were, well, I think it might actually be a gum. But anyway, you can read this if you want to know more about it. But for the pagan societies, these frankincense was very important for their pagan rituals. And because paganism was so vast in different parts of the world, it meant that this area was obviously very important for frankincense and incense, and for these trade routes. But then as Christianity started to grow and paganism started to decline, because Christianity started to spread throughout the Roman Empire, this area started to suffer in terms of trade, because there was less demand for this frankincense and incense. So you can read this article if that sounds interesting to you. But just a very obviously an important kingdom. And they said in here that one of the problems may have been the dam collapsing, maybe through earthquakes. I can't remember if it said it, where it said it. It was something to do with the dam. But if you can read that, you can see my link if you want to read that. Yeah, there was an earthquake that destroyed the dam. But the sons of Mizraim and Cush, we don't have a lot of information on some of these sons like we do with the Hittites. And I think the reason could be explained in Josephus, because he tells us that there was this Ethiopic war, and that's why we know very little about some of these nations. So that could maybe explain why we don't have a lot of record of these these sons of Mizraim and some of these sons of Cush. But he does say that Cush was one of the sons of Ham that actually managed to keep his name for his kingdom, because it was very powerful, and with the Sabians. So it was more maybe Mizraim that suffered the most. But we can find something on this Lehabim, because Josephus tells us something interesting. He tells us that Libya is actually named after a son of Mizraim who was called Libios. So if we go to Jubilees, it says that Put would dwell to the west of Mizraim. So Put would dwell to the west of Mizraim, that's Libya. But Libya doesn't really sound connected to Put. So Josephus is saying that's because it was actually a son of Mizraim called Lehabim that named this land of Libya. That's what Josephus says. And now we do have the Philistines, which is a famous nation that comes out of Mizraim, and the Bible has many stories about the Philistines. So we can't really cover it in this video. Maybe we can do them in a separate video if we get a chance. But the Philistines, they come out of these two nations, the Casluhites and the Caphtorites, from Ham. Now I just saw something a bit strange in this article, because it says here that most scholars agree that the Philistines were of Greek origin. And that's a bit strange, because Josephus and the Bible is saying that the Philistines, they come out of Ham. See that? But here in this, they're saying that most scholars agreeing that they are of Greek origin. So we might have to do a little study on these Philistines to see why they're saying this, and see if we can find a reason for this connection with the Greeks, saying that the Philistines were of Greek origin. But Josephus says that the Philistines they were one of the few who were able to keep their name for their land, and that's the Philistine name is connected to Palestine, the land of Palestine. So Philistia was able to keep the name of their land, because they're quite a powerful kingdom in the ancient world, or a powerful people. But I think we're getting towards the end of the video. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of information about some of these sons of Ham. Like even Put, if you think about Put, we don't really have much information like we do with like the Amorites and the Hittites with Put for his sons. But we do have this connection, obviously with Libya, but there's this other connection. It might have been on this other map. Let's look at this map. No, it wasn't that one. I think maybe it was this one. Oh, it was here. You can see out of Scotland the Punt. Now there's this legendary place known as the Punt, and scholars are still not 100% sure exactly where this kingdom of Punt was, but this is one of the strongest locations. It could be Somaliland going into Yemen for this legendary Punt, and the Punt's connected to to Put, or possibly connected to Put. So there could have been descendants of Put even in this region. But they may have spread out over vast areas to other regions as well, because we've kind of spoken about the Hamites spreading, further east and to different parts of the world. That we mustn't just think that they only dwell in Africa or in like Saudi Arabia. So I hope you enjoyed that video on Cush, especially this connection with the Sumerian Kish. That's a very, very important potential element, because it really kind of supports the work that we've been doing in this picture that we're building. That we're looking in this region, and maybe we're not so far off the mark with what we're looking at. Now in the next video we're going to do a small summary just of the work that we've been doing. So just a few key points that we need to know going forward for the rest of the sons of Noah, because we're going to be going on to Japheth, and so this is the end of the section of Ham. So in the next video we'll do a short summary, and then we'll do the first son of Japheth. And until the next video, see you soon.